Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you, first of all. So you literally can't see shit up here. Thank you so much to NiceApp for having me. I watched a bunch of Nicer Tuesdays kind of in preparation for this, and I realized how many amazing people have spoken here. So I'm very grateful to be part of that. So, oh, look at that. So yeah, for those of you who don't know me, those of you who do know me and have just forgotten my name is Kris Andrew Small, and I'm an artist/designer. I say the slash because I always think I'm technically the worst graphic designer on the planet. So if I can kind of like say that I'm an artist as well, then it kind of like gets me out of a bunch of shit. But I also kind of always think that I'm an artist that trained as a graphic designer, and I kind of just made my bed and now I have to lie in it. But so I work a lot with typography, a lot with collage, a lot with kind of textural works, and then I kind of have like another style where I just like blend it all together. But yeah, I'm just going to take you a bit through my kind of journey. I hate that word. Journey kind of from starting off as a creative to kind of where I'm at now, because there's a bunch of different things. And then I'll show you some projects. Kind of forgot what I was going to say there. So I think the first thing I want to talk about, also I'm sorry for my accent. I fucking hate the Australian accent. So sorry to subject you all to it. It's only 15 minutes, you'll be fine, I promise. But I think this a question people always ask me, and I never really know how to answer it. So I've kind of just avoided it and I say something else. But people always ask me what my process is. And I don't really feel like I actually have a process, but I kind of have like a purpose or like a reason for making work. And that's kind of split into two categories, and they've kind of come at different points in my career. So the first one is to make, which I think this is probably something, I'm assuming a lot of you are creatives, is something people can really relate to, is kind of having that need to make work, or that kind of like fire, I guess, inside you of wanting to make kind of content and to make things. And I was really shit in school. I sucked at sport, but I really liked making things. I love playing with Lego. We grew up near a bunch of building sites, and I used to sneak onto them and build like these little sculptures out of like nails and things. My parents like don't know where they were, but it's just like Kris playing with nails again. But I just kind of always had that need to make things, and I still have that now, and that really drives me a lot of the time. So yeah, this is fun. So I started out and I studied graphic design at TAFE, which is I don't know how to translate it, but it's the shit version of university, basically. But I studied graphic design, and I originally had wanted to study film, and I just didn't get into the course. So I studied graphic design, and I remember when we first started learning, they were showing us Photoshop. And they were like, so do you want to design this logo for a cafe? And I was like, do you know what? I'd probably much rather make a bunch of GIFs. So I was just kind of like, this is me, very young, just learning Photoshop, learning kind of like what I liked, what I wanted to make. I actually I couldn't find any of these, so I found one of my old blog spots, and I just basically raided it and found all these old GIFs that I made. But at this point in my career, I was definitely not thinking about the work. I was just making collages of. I love Justin Timberlake, but I was just making work that I thought was cool and interesting. And this I like a lot. I had a brand with my best friend when I was like 18, 19, and we just made these ridiculous clothes, and we sold in Japan, and we did quite well. It's just we were 18 and had no idea how to run a business. But it was just me kind of like always wanting to make. And then when I was around 20, I moved to the UK, and I lived in London for about 6 or 7 years. And I worked in advertising that whole time. And I'm very aware that probably a lot of you work in advertising, so I'll be very careful about what I say. But I'm very harsh on advertising, and at the end of the day, it just wasn't for me. But at the same time, I learned so much in it, because I really learned how to make my work really accessible and really, really consider the person at the other end that would have to digest the work. So while in the end it wasn't really for me, I did get a lot out of it. And I mean, you saw those GIFs before. Like, I wasn't thinking about the end, like the person that was going to see it at the end. I was just making shit for myself. So I worked in advertising. I was going to have a quick sip. This is hectic, by the way. That's much better. So yeah, I was working in advertising for about 6 or 7 years. Then I moved around Europe for a little bit, and eventually I moved back to Australia. And this is a question I feel like I get asked all the time. They're like, why do you use so much color in your work? And this is a photo of my hometown in 1988, which was when the World Expo was, which is also my birth year, which makes me 25. Give or take. But when I look at this photo, it kind of just sums up my childhood. And I feel like I grew up in this place that was like super colorful, super contrasty. It was always sunny. There was all these like amazing tropical plants. And so for me, it's like, it's just really natural to kind of default to these colors. I kind of don't understand why you'd use monochrome, no offense to it. But in my head, it just makes a lot of sense to kind of make color. So around this time, I'd moved back to Australia. I didn't really want to work in advertising anymore. I think I'd finally kind of accepted that I was gay. I think with queer people a lot of the time, I'd come out, sorry, didn't set up the scene. I'd come out years before this, but I think a lot of the time with queer people, we come out and then we're supposed to be like A-OK, perfectly straight away. And I think normally you come out and then there's years of trauma that you've got to deal with, or you've kind of invented this persona for yourself that you then need to get rid of and kind of learn how to be a person. So I was really going through that, and I was basically just searching for meaning in my life and kind of in my work. So I started making all of this work that was really kind of a bit like activist-y, a bit kind of like anti-toxic masculinity, like super kind of like pro-queer, and it was just kind of me dealing with like my personal situation and like finally putting it in my work. And I'm really grateful for advertising because it kind of gave me the brain power to be able to kind of make work that could be accessible. I started making these textures. I was still working in advertising while I made these. And these are Vodafone ads that I was angry with. So I went back to basics and went home and just messed around with them in, I was going to say Facebook, in Photoshop, and kind of made these textures, and it really like gave me a new way of making work. So yeah, around this time I was just making a bunch of that work. I then quit advertising quite dramatically, and around that time I'd applied to have a first exhibition. This is a photo of me at my first exhibition about 3-ish years ago. Give or take. And I remember in this photo, I felt so satisfied because I felt like up until this point, I was really confusing to myself and to other people. And finally, when I had this show, people were like, oh, kind of Kris makes sense now. And I could kind of have all my ideas on the planet on myself, and they were kind of surrounding me, and it made a lot of sense. So it was like a really liberating moment. And it kind of basically led to the start of my career. And from that moment, I started getting kind of a lot of commissions. This is a photo taken roughly a year later, and it's in the Reebok headquarters in Boston in America. And it was just like a really crazy year for me because I'd gone from having my first show to like being in America and kind of like having all these opportunities like in that first year of being a creative. And while it was really exciting, like it seems really quick that I went from being like first exhibition to kind of getting a lot of good opportunities. For me, I'd been like slogging away for 7 years, and it kind of, it only felt, for me, it felt like it was really, really slow. And I think a lot of the time with creatives, we see the end thing and we're like, wow, that's amazing, they got there really fast. And you rarely see the kind of like 10-year journey that it takes to get there. So yeah, this is a project. I did the campaign for this trainer, and as part of that, they flew me to the States and they were like, can you make this kind of like sculptural, here's me pretending to install. But it was a really, really fun project, and I had a great time, and it was just, a lot happens in that year, and it was really crazy. So now I want to talk, I feel like I've got so many kind of different parts of my work, but I think typography is probably my favorite one. And I mean, I have a lot of things to say, and it's really easy to say them with typography. And I guess I've always kind of treated typography like a little bit differently. I kind of see it as a bunch of shapes you just have to arrange on a page. I don't see it as letters. I still have to Google the difference between leading and kerning. I still don't know, but because I just see them as shapes, and I think a lot of the time I get in trouble about things not being very legible, and I think there's kind of beauty in something not being instantly recognizable. It's nice when someone has to look, a little bit deeper and kind of try to read your work as opposed to just kind of like quickly flick through it. I've recently started animating. Recently, it's been like 2 years, but I'm very impatient and restless. So animation is a real challenge for me because it takes a lot of time, and I'm not used to that. But I genuinely am really, really enjoying it. So through my typographical work, I've had like a bunch of different things, but I wanted to talk to you about this one project that I did at the end of last year here in the UK, and it was for Gay Times, and I think some of them are here tonight. But it was funny because just before this, I'd had a conversation with my agent, and I was like, I really want to be doing larger installation work. Like, I'm kind of sick of just making things for Instagram, and I really want to make work that's a bit more kind of large scale. And then this project kind of landed in my lap. So it was just like really, really good timing. But I feel like we'd be kind of manifesting it, and we'd been like putting feelers out and kind of trying to get a large installation project for a while. So it was really satisfying, and it was just really like nice for me to be hired by Gay Times and kind of go back to my beginnings of making these really like statement-y kind of like pro-queer pieces of work. And it was really fun. I went with a bunch of my friends and we went to the event, and it was just like an incredibly amazing evening. And I have a few of them hanging in my studio now, which is great. But the point of that is manifestation is such an important thing. I think a lot of the time we kind of sit back and wait for things to come to us. And I think it's really important to always just be like putting yourself out there and putting your work out there and being like, this is kind of what I'm aiming for. How can I get there? And what can I do to kind of make that a reality? Promise we're getting towards the end. Oh my God, I've gone so over. Oh, maybe this clock's wrong. I'll pretend it is. This is another project I did for Adidas and Zalando that I almost said no to, not because I didn't want to work for the client, but I just felt like it was two brands, and I thought it would just be too many cooks and it would be really difficult. And in the end, it's one of my favorite projects I've ever done because I just felt like it kind of summed up like my work at that point. And I said before, I don't really love sport, but I love staying fit and being active. So I felt like this was kind of combining a bunch of my styles together. And I was just really happy. And it was in the second lockdown in Germany, I think. And loads of people were sending me videos like this, being like, hey, like I saw your work, kind of cheered me up. And that was just really nice. And I was stuck in Australia, and it felt like at least my work was getting out in the world. So that was one of my favorite projects I've done to date. So now, I don't know if you call this an epiphany, an analogy, or a metaphor, or just a lesson. I don't actually know, but you have to humor me for a little bit because it's a little weird. But I kind of had an epiphany a few months ago, and I'll explain you how. So, firstly, sorry about the photo of my hairy arms, but these are my forearms. With obviously, you can see some small tattoos. This is my my childhood home that I grew up in, and I forgot where I was going with it. Yeah, it was my favorite house on the block because we had a triangle window and a circular window, and I just thought that was really cool. And years later, it dawned on me, my parents don't live there anymore, but I went back to see the house, and I realized that I literally tattooed those two windows on my forearms, completely subconsciously, not knowing. And it just made me really realize that, like, we are our work, and I'm a product of all of the things that have happened in my life. So I use color because I grew up somewhere tropical that was colorful. I make work about being queer because I am queer. And I think that's really important. I think often as creatives, we kind of fall into this like hole of like looking at Pinterest for inspiration, and we forget that like every creative has like a story, or every person on the planet really has like a country they come from, or like a sexuality or a gender or whatever, and or like a favorite color. Like I love the color yellow because I had yellow curtains in my bedroom, you know. And while that seems silly to me, that's kind of unique to me, and everyone has kind of a similar thing. Sounds a bit cheesy, but I'm just trying to say, like, every time you start a new project, it's really easy to fall down the influence, kind of like trying to find influence, and we forget to look inside ourselves and see what's possible from everything in our life up until that point, because that's an incredibly great source of inspiration. And that's kind of it from me. You can follow me on Instagram, Kris Andrew Small, and thank you so much to It's Nice That and for coming.